The views expressed on the Warren and Bradley Show are not necessarily those held by the hosts, Warren and Bradley, nor those of the proprietors of the website, warrenandbradley.com.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire!
Let's make some magic.
It is magic time. Hello and welcome once again to the Warren and Bradley Show. I am one of your hosts, Bradley Victor.
I am the other host, Warren.
It is episode 32 on the Warren and Bradley Show.
Why does that get a fucking?
Well, because it's 32 episodes. That's a lot of fucking episodes.
Oh.
We should just, the expletives have to fly when
I
you
guess
reach a
so.
milestone like
Yeah.
that. We have another packed show for y'all. We're going to have a Street Freak of the Week. We're going to have some listener feedback, some listeners writing in, asking us questions, queries, comments, concerns. We're going to have a celebrity minute. There's a very major celebrity story that happened in the last week that we'll have to touch on.
Oh, yeah. I know everyone wants just waiting to hear about that.
Yes, but first things first, Warren Van, how have you been? What's been going on?
Oh, the usual stuff. I went to breakfast with my siblings this morning.
Oh, yeah.
And had some biscuits and gravy.
Oh, yeah.
And that was all right. And I just watched the championship game of the European soccer tournament.
Exciting.
And Spain, again, is the champion of Europe.
Were they the champion of Europe last time?
Yes.
Are they often the champion of Europe?
They've been consecutive times they've been champion, and they won the World Cup 2 years ago. So it's an unprecedented run of success for the Spanish national team.
A soccer dynasty, if you will.
I will say that. I will say dynasty right now.
And why do you give a shit about European football?
Oh, why do you give a shit about anything?
I don't know.
It's interesting.
I ask myself that same question all the time, but sometimes I come up with answers, sometimes I don't. What is your answer for the
I don't
soccer
know.
question?
I've enjoyed learning about the game and watching the game, and
It seems horribly boring to me.
I guess it is in this certain way because there's a lot of scoring.
No.
There's a lot of other things going on you can watch.
You run down the field over and over and over and over again. People dribble the ball on their feet.
But this is every
over and over
sport,
and over
right?
again. I don't know. Not
basketball,
really. I mean,
you just dribble the ball down the...
Football's exciting to watch.
Is it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I find
People are-
football less exciting.
At least they're smacking each other around. If soccer, I mean, I guess there's some
But
body
that's a very
checks
low
every once in a
standard
while.
for making something interesting. If people are being smacked around...
Well, it's a very low standard, but it's also pretty much hits every time. I mean, kick to the crotch, lowest common denominator,
Yeah.
but it is entertaining.
I haven't found American football that riveting for a long time.
I just
don't
always
think I like
remember
the violence.
I remember the Simpsons episode where they were trying to get people excited about
Yes.
soccer in Springfield.
I believe Mexico was playing Uruguay or something.
Something
Yeah.
to that effect, yes. And I pretty much agreed with Homer's analysis of the game.
Well, people of Springfield actually started to riot. They were so bored with the
Yes.
game. Yeah. I'm not going to riot. It's a sport that's growing in America.
Yeah.
People are getting more interested in it because there's just more access with the internet.
Yes.
And so, it's something new to watch. I mean, what am I going to do with my time?
I don't know.
Take an interest in soccer.
What I do with my time is research Celebrity Minute on the internet.
Well, exactly. Why do you do
Try
that?
to interact with homeless people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of masturbation involved.
Oh, I believe it.
I don't combine
When the
the
homeless
two.
people, you mean the homeless people?
No.
Yeah.
That's a separate
Yeah.
thing. Speaking of homeless people, well, not even speaking of homeless people, we'll have to get to that later, our Street Freak of the Week. We
Right.
do have one this week. But I also had some just weirdo encounters again. It seems like every time, I go through the whole week without having any weirdo encounters, and then we're getting right to the point where we're going to be recording the show, and God smiles upon me and sends freaks my way.
It's as if they know they need to
I don't know.
interact with you.
Sometimes I wish that life were like that, where people were just aware of what was happening and they were actually fulfilling my needs, like people were aware of my needs and they would just come and fulfill them for me. But I had a very angry middle-aged woman today who I was driving downtown, gonna go get a bagel, and
Is there? What else are you doing? Yeah, we know that.
well, this is all for work. It's
Yeah,
for
yeah.
research. Driving down, was waiting at a red light. The light turns green, so I start driving across the intersection. There's a fat middle-aged woman who was waiting to cross the intersection, and when my light turned green, she decided that was when she was
Yes.
supposed to cross the street, which was wrong.
No, yeah.
So I start going across the intersection. I see her trundling across, so I stop a good 10 feet from her.
Yeah.
And she goes, yeah! Gets really pissed because she sees that I was there,
Yeah.
almost about to hit her, even though it was a good
was a
10
green
feet.
light.
And she goes, "Hey, I'm walking here." It's like she was from New York or something. And I go and point to the green light.
Yeah.
Which I don't even know if she could see because she was right in the middle of the intersection. And then I went, "Hey," and did the like shrug, like, "What are you doing?" And she went, "Young punks." I'm a punk, apparently.
Yeah.
And then she went, "Ba-bam," and beat on the hood of my car.
Really?
Yeah.
You should have run her down.
Well, I did. Well, I didn't run her down, but I went bam and went forward really quick, and then put on my brakes again, and she went oh, and then ran across the intersection.
Did you really?
Oh yeah,
that's pretty great.
She pissed me off.
Yeah, I can see.
If she had been male, I would have gotten out of my car and beaten her with a tire iron or something. But
it's probably for the best that she wasn't then.
I don't think she'd ever moved that fast in like the last 10 years of her life. But she
was probably good for her.
She scurried away.
The thing about I understand if you're if you have the walk signal and you cross the street and somebody's barreling at you through a red light, how you might be a little bit annoyed. But if you're like jaywalking when it says not to walk and someone stops for you, you really have no place to be angry with them at all.
Well, because I've had that happen a bunch of times where I'm waiting to cross and somebody's trying to turn on a green light.
Yeah.
And they're supposed to pay attention to the crosswalk. So
they are supposed to stop.
Start sauntering out, and then they're like, right in front of me, and I do the, hey, every once in a while.
Yeah.
And they usually give the sheepish, like, wave, but...
Yeah, but you weren't turning.
No.
This is a circumstance where they're supposed to wait.
She was waiting when it said walk for her, and then as soon as it turned to don't walk, she started walking.
That's a weird thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And you can't blame, like, red-green color blindness or anything, because there's a little person.
No, it's I think it's built that way specifically for that, right? Because there's actual picture that lights up. And even if your vision's poor, you can tell, like, the area where the walk thing is and the area where the not walk thing is are different. They're on top of each other. So
different
you should
colors.
Be able to figure it out.
One spells out don't walk.
Yeah.
One has a little stick figure walking.
I am a big fan of the don't walk pedestrian ones that count down.
Oh, yeah, I like those.
I think that's great because it tells you how much time you have. You know if you're going to chance it and go across when it's flashing.
I like it when I'm driving, too, because then I know that I'm supposed to speed up when it says, like, 2 or 3, and I go, and barrel through the intersection.
That's probably not what they envisioned when they put those in there.
Well, it's the same thing with the fucking red light cameras, where people know there's a red light camera, so they're like, ooh, it's going to turn yellow soon, so they just barrel through the intersection, or they just slam on the brakes and people run into the back of them because they don't want to get a fucking ticket.
You know what's odd? Are you ever at an intersection where they have that, like, loud, like, beeping noise
beep,
for, like...
beep for blind people.
For blind people? But just randomly at random intersections.
Yeah, how far seem to be any rhyme or reason.
No, how far around can you get on that?
I was thinking the other day about how much it would suck to be blind.
Oh, it's terrible to be blind.
I'd much rather be deaf.
Oh, without doubt. There's no debate on that. You'll ask people that and think about it for a second, but once they actually think about it, they always go, oh, I'd much rather be deaf.
I think it'd be better... Okay, would it be better to be blind from birth or better to be struck blind later?
Depends how late it is. I mean, if you're in your 80s.
Like right now.
Oh, geez. That's a tough one.
Yeah, it's an interesting
You know what I mean?
question.
I haven't enjoyed the first 30-odd years of my life that much anyways. To be struck blind now would just make it much worse. I don't know if I was blind from birth. Oh, man. I don't know. I guess I'm going to take as much... No.
Blind from birth, you know, you're pretty much used to it, and you don't know what you're missing.
No.
You know?
And you've adjusted to it, and it's not this thing where you're always thinking about the fact that you used to be able to see and always just mourning that fact.
Yeah.
Because the idea of, like, being blinded at some point in your life and then having to go on with your life after some horrible accident is just really discouraging.
Well, and you could get chicks all the time, too, if you're blind from birth, because if you're hanging out with a girl and you're looking at the sunset, or she's looking at the sunset, then you can go, what does the sunset look like? And she'll go, oh, and be touched. And
what is
try
this
to
Val
describe.
Kilmer movie? Remember this?
No.
With Mira Sorvino?
No.
And he's blind, and then there's some sort of procedure, and he gets his sight back.
No.
He can't handle it.
I had wished I was blind earlier today when I was sitting out in front of the bagery, and there was a very, very large woman walking by, and she dropped a popsicle that she was eating.
Yeah.
She bent down to retrieve the popsicle off the pavement. Apparently, she was still going to lick that motherfucker after she had gotten it off the pavement. Her shorts sagged down, exposing cellulite ass. There was hair in her ass crack.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Oh.
Quite the burning bush going on there.
Well, she has a popsicle that make her happy, at least. I don't know.
She was very pleased with the popsicle, so pleased with it that she... If I drop a popsicle on the pavement... Anything sticky, if it drops on the floor, that's pretty much the end.
It's done.
If it's like a cracker, I'll just blow it off and pop it back in my mouth.
If it's on a surface that doesn't have much like hair or dirt on already.
Meh, usually
if you drop
can
a
just blow that
cracker
off.
on a sidewalk, would you pick up the cracker and eat it?
Probably.
Really?
Probably.
But I always feel like you'd have more than just that one cracker, so I just throw that cracker away.
Yeah.
If I dropped it in my house,
You need
I
a
might
certain
blow it
amount of
off.
crackers to be comfortable, though, and if you're missing a cracker, you're not fulfilled with your cracker intake.
So you feel like if you had thrown that one cracker away, you'd always feel like you were missing a one cracker?
Well, I'd feel like I'd had 12 crackers and I wanted to have 13.
Well, it's like the woman that like grows up thinking she's going to have 4 children, and she never has the 4th, and then she's always feeling like she's denying that.
But if she
had
4 children and she had dropped one on the sidewalk, I'm sure she would stoop and retrieve it.
Well, she'd stoop and retrieve it, but she'd feel much worse if it died after she did have it.
Possibly.
I used to read a lot of like advice columns like Ann Landers, and there's some Dickinson woman who does it in our local paper. It seems like that question came up a lot about women who were like really sad about not having the baby they'd always envisioned them having, and thinking that was a way of killing the baby that never existed.
So they had other babies that didn't live up to the baby.
Well, no, they had an idea of how many babies they would have, because they didn't actually get to the number that they had envisioned.
Right.
They felt like they were denying life to this other baby that they had created in their mind.
Yeah, that's psychotic.
It's kind of weird.
I don't think men ever have that problem.
Another one of those, I was reading one of those columns at work the other day, and a woman wrote in and said that her daughter was engaged to a doctor, a very fine man, an excellent physician. Apparently he never served in the armed forces.
Uh-oh.
Outraged the parents. They didn't want to have anything to do with the wedding.
What is the percentage of people who have served in the armed forces nowadays?
It's a completely insane letter, right?
Maybe, or something?
This is the thing. They're like, well, one of their other sons had served or something. Yeah. So they're like, how can we just let this lazy bum, this doctor, marry our daughter because he's never served in the army?
Whereas there could be some hick from Arkansas who was like a, I don't know, Humvee technician, and he'd be great.
Yeah, dishonorably discharged for drinking on the job, but he served at least. Those columns are full of just completely whacked out people like that. Obsessed with like being slighted by their siblings for not getting a card at one time.
Well, imagine the kind of person who writes into advice columns and needs a stranger to tell them what to do with their life, you know? They're probably not playing with the full deck to begin with.
Well, they're not, and apparently they don't have anyone to ask in their own life. Or else the other thing is they're asking everyone in their life, like, probably this woman's like going around being like, can you believe my daughter wants to marry this doctor? What a bitch. And people are like, what, are you insane?
So she needs validation
she's like,
Ann Landers.
I read like Ann Landers. I read these articles, and I agree with this woman a lot, so I'll write into her, and then she has to set her straight.
You know, this puts me in mind of a sort of ambition we had early on in the show where we were hoping that maybe we could get people to write in with their questions and problems, and we could give them advice. I think we should try to bring that back. We would actually need some audience participation, which
people have questions, though.
They do have questions, but I want to give advice. Warren and Bradley.
I know, that's what I'm saying about. I mean, if people are going through their life right now, a lot of people, and if you want to write to us and remain anonymous, we will honor your anonymity.
We will. I can look up your IP address and probably find out who you are from that, but I won't.
We won't do that. What?
Well,
don't do that. Don't say that.
Okay. I won't do that.
Even if you were to write into us on the Facebook thing, we will not say who you are. We're like a priest or a doctor.
We usually hide people's identity anyway, because most of the people who write in are people who know us, and we want to pretend that we don't know
Usually
them.
We hide the fact that the only people that write into us are the people that know us, and
exactly.
You try to pretend that we're a very popular show.
Exactly. Well, we are a very popular show, but we just happen to have a lot of people who know us writing because they like us so much.
I don't think any of that's true. Yeah.
But if you are a listener and you have some problems, you need some advice, maybe some love life advice, maybe just about, jobs, careers, women.
We can
men.
sort you out.
We'll do our best. Maybe if we get enough responses, we will have a Warren and Bradley advice columns section of the show.
And maybe we'll eventually get in the Bellingham Herald.
Exactly.
Have you read the Bellingham Herald recently?
Never.
Because I'm at work, I'm having lunch, sometimes I pick it up because it's just sitting there.
The Bellingham Herald is a local Bellingham paper.
Yeah, it doesn't have nationwide distribution. No. It's getting more local all the time, but there's just nothing in there for me.
No.
This advice column about crazy women talking about their daughters marrying doctors.
Yes.
The comics are still in there.
Yeah,
comics are the most useless thing ever. Not amusing, not interesting in any way. And then a lot of coverage of high school swimming and things that the only people that could possibly be interested in that would be these people's parents, or their uncle likes to read about their niece being a great swimmer at a local high school. Who needs this?
Newspapers should be dead by now anyway. I don't know why they're still hanging around.
Well, the New Orleans Time-Picayune, I believe, is only publishing a couple days a week now.
Yeah, there's a lot of them going that way. I think there's just a few 64-year-olds who like to do the whole folding the paper out. They like the broadsheet.
And they like the obituaries.
Yeah.
I know there are lots of older people that are really like the obituaries, and they read it and they go, oh, Hazel died. Hazel Smith. And they go, who was she related to?
Right.
Was she Jean's wife? And they'll be like, no. Hank's wife. And be like, well, who did Hank marry? And then like, oh, married Hazel's sister. And then they'll talk for a long time about this until they eventually die as well and are in the paper and someone says the same things about them.
It's the circle of life. So we never gave out our email address for people who want to write in seeking advice. Write to podcast@warrenandbradley.com, and we will sort you the fuck out.
We have lots of good ideas.
We do.
We're known for our ability to give advice to people, but never take our own advice to ourselves.
And it'll give me the opportunity to make a new bumper music segment.
Oh, Brad loves reasons to make bumper music.
And playing bumper music.
And playing bumper music, new segments.
Speaking of which... let's get to listener feedback on the Warren and Bradley Show.
Dear Warren and Bradley, I am writing this missive to let you know that I was utterly delighted with last week's episode. Your tales of prostitutes and the indigent are always quite illuminating, and I say, could you turn off that racket? Turn it off, I say! What are you doing? Can't hear myself make this ridiculous noise.
Listener feedback on the Warren and Bradley Show.
This missive, look, I even printed it out on paper. You hear that? It's the sound of the paper.
This is a weird radio thing to do.
This is from listener Jed.
I believe we mentioned in the last podcast.
We can't pretend that
I was wondering if you were going to mention his name because it sounds like we sound really small time. We're like, oh, we talked to our friend Jed, and now our friend Jed's writing into us.
Well, maybe this is a different Jed.
Oh, it's probably a different Jed.
In your discussion of Emma Roberts' attractiveness, I noted the hint of anxiety at the possibility that she was drastically young, followed by relief at the revelation of her age, 21. I thought we said she was 22.
I think 21's right.
Okay. Which made it okay. This made me wonder what principles should govern the appropriateness of attraction in the context of age disparity. What premises should guide judgments on what's considered normal, natural to find attractive? How different is this from the acceptability of pursuing erotic relations? I'm thinking less of the legal standard, age of consent, than of social mores, what one's peers would think. Is it different for older female to younger male relations or for same-sex scenarios? Jed's very well spoken there.
Yes, very well.
It shows that our demographic is very educated and highly literate.
Yes, definitely. There's a distinction to be drawn, of course.
Yes.
Between if a male's attracted to a female.
Yes.
And the fact that a male would engage that female in some sort of romantic liaison.
Exactly. So I think one thing Jed is asking is, what is it appropriate to be attracted to?
Yes.
What's normal? And then also, through that, where was the appropriate age range for actually pursuing a relationship? It seems like women always get irritated about what men find attractive.
Yes.
You could be with some female friends and you see, maybe a 15-year-old girl walking by. And you go, hey, she's attractive. And they go, oh, like you're some sort of pervert?
No.
When you say that she's attractive, you mean that, you know, she's pretty. She has youthful beauty. No, it does not mean that you're going to go up to her and try to ask her out on a date.
This is how it works with us as biological entities.
Yes.
We're post-pubescent males.
Yes.
We are attracted to post-pubescent females.
Yes.
So once they become post-pubescent, they are attractive.
And that is not weird.
That is not
totally
weird
normal.
at all. What is weird is if you were to try to seduce that 15-year-old.
Yes, if you start hanging out at the middle school.
Because that is our society, and our society thinks that's wrong because it's weird.
That would not have been weird, 150 years ago. That would have been fine. My great-grandmother got married when she was 13 years old.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty young.
Well, it was like a rural farming kind of thing. She was sexually mature. Some guy kidnapped her or something. I don't know what the hell happened.
Shanghai. It's a weird thing to say about your great-grandmother.
Yeah.
She was sexually mature.
Well, I better.
The problem is, of course, appropriateness of attraction has to do with more the fact that, like, obviously if you're attracted to a 4-year-old girl...
That is inappropriate.
No, but even beyond inappropriate, that means you probably have something pathological going on.
Probably.
Yeah, almost inevitably. So you need to, like, address that issue with some sort of therapist or treatment. If you're being attracted to a 16-year-old... is not something, there's no problem with you.
Yes. And I've tried to explain this to women. They don't seem to get this.
Well, they just don't want to see the distinction. The distinction's right there, and it's like pretty black and white.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not...
It's once a human being is sexually mature, that means that they are then in the realm of biological appropriateness for breeding. It does not mean that you are going to do these things.
No.
It just means that you like to fantasize and masturbate about them.
And, and the idea that it's somehow wrong to be attracted to someone who's 16, I don't think there's anything wrong with being attracted to anyone. Because I don't think you can control that necessarily.
Well, there's something wrong. There's something aberrant, as you said, to be attracted to a 4-year-old.
Yes, but even if you have that sort of like aberrant sexuality and you don't act on it because you're an ethical person because you know it's wrong. Right. The fact that you feel that way, I don't think you can control that either.
Is there something you need to tell us there, Warren?
Do you understand the distinction I'm making there, though, too?
I do. And it's like the pedophile who never acts out on his urges.
The pedophile who never acts out on their urges is not a bad person.
No. They're fucked up, but...
Maybe they were abused as a child.
Perhaps.
If this person who has these impulses makes a choice not to act on them, that's not a bad person.
No.
That's just a person who has, like, problems.
I often have psychotic impulses, but I don't act on them because I know that I live in a society. So that does not make me a bad person either.
No, it does not. Yeah. And just the idea that you get so angry at someone that you want to wring their neck and you don't wring their neck doesn't mean you're a bad person either.
Making an effigy of them and perhaps bludgeoning it with a blunt instrument. That's a good, healthy way of getting out.
Doing something where no one's getting harmed. You can't go down to the local high school and start seducing the girls there. Even though you're like, biologically, I feel impelled to do this.
Right.
It's best for everyone involved if you don't.
Well, and that's what Jed also mentions here is the talking about the acceptability of pursuing erotic relations. Where do you draw that line? We always used to have fun with that formula of half your age plus 7.
Yes.
Which really works in many ways. If you break it down, it seems to actually...
It's oddly
accurate. Usually, if people are in a bar together, it's fair game, but it might not necessarily be a good idea if you're so far removed in age. Like, if you're 50 and there's a 21-year-old, that only works if you're fucking rich, basically. And it only works if you're male to female. There is this weird societal thing where younger women, it's more socially acceptable for younger women to date older men than it is for older women to date younger men.
And there's also...
Or did I just say that right?
I don't know. I know what you're saying, though.
Yeah.
There's also the thing in the gay community with younger men with older men.
Yeah, I see that all the time.
Which is considered more normal.
Yeah. There's actually an article, or I think it was like an ABC News special or something years ago that one of my friends had pointed out to me. It was called like Geezer Power, older men plus younger women equals longer lifespan. And basically they go into the whole thing of human beings live way, way past their reproductive life cycle.
Yes.
Which is very odd in other animals. Most animals, once they've reproduced, raised a few litters of puppies or chickens or whatever the fuck they're having, they die.
Like salmon just swimming upstream and then dying after they spawn.
And that's normal because once you've made the next generation safe and it's possible for them to go on and reproduce, there's really no reason for you to be around anymore.
Your genes have been passed on and protected.
And scientists have theorized that the reasons humans live so much longer than their reproductive age is also obviously partly, medical science and eradication of disease and things like that. But the main reason they think is that of older men impregnating younger women in the dawn of humanity, because older men who have proven their fitness for survival, you get to be in your 40s, you haven't died of any weird congenital defects, you haven't dropped dead from some heart valve problem or something like that.
Yeah.
You pass on that fitness to your offspring.
Genetic things are going on with you that keep you alive past 40 or whatever.
Right.
You're passing all that on because you are alive past 40.
Exactly. And they mention, there's a lot of hunter-gatherer tribes that are still around, and the median age difference between a man and his bride is much larger than it is in, quote, modern societies.
Yes.
And I think in our society now, since adolescence has been prolonged forever, 150 years ago, there was no teenage year. You were prepubescent, and then once you hit puberty, you were an adult, basically, and you took on the responsibilities of an adult. Now, people are adolescents into their 20s. So I think that's why maybe the age range is kind of narrowed a little bit for us.
And that's where we've gone as a society, I think. And the fact that you have a cohort, you have like a group of people you grow up with, and typically you marry or reproduce within that age group of that certain section.
Which is a really bad idea, in my opinion.
What's wrong with that?
I think you got to go at least 10 years younger. If you're going to marry a woman, because there's the reproductive age. We can have kids for as long as we fucking want. We marry a woman our age, she's got a couple years if you ever want to have a family, and then that's it.
Because do you know what the average age of marriage is for a man versus a woman? Is it comparable right now in America?
Men get married a little later than women. I think it's only a couple years difference, though.
Is that growing?
I don't know.
You know where the problem with this is? You should try to inseminate a woman in her 40s because you know if she's got to into her 40s.
Yeah,
I don't see that. Yeah, I didn't think you were going to do that. It was very self-serving, your idea of what should be going on.
Well, and it does work to our advantage.
Yeah, it's a lot of people marrying their high school sweethearts.
That doesn't work, though, because a woman in her 40s is hardly fertile anymore, if she is at all.
But I think there's some breakdown within the genetic material of your sperm when you get older, too.
Well, you're not as fertile as you were when you were 20, but you can still sire children.
Well, so can 40-year-old women a lot of the time.
Yeah, but they often, there's also defects and things that go on. Freaked out. The other thing that Jed was mentioning was the age of consent, which is 16 in the state of Washington.
Yes.
We would never date 16-year-olds. That's just not socially acceptable. You might not get arrested, but...
There's also another distinction to be made. There's the biological, there's the social, and there's also the ethical. Mm-hmm. When you were talking about, deciding if you were going to date a 20-year-old, let's say, or something like that... you wouldn't date the 20-year-old who had the maturity level of a 15-year-old.
Well, yeah, that's the thing too. I mean, it has to be a case-by-case basis.
It is a case-by-case basis, and as a person, you make an ethical choice, and you make a decision based on a person's maturity. You can never take that out of the system. They can never legislate that into people. Yeah.
Well, and I think they just try to get as close as they can with the laws, and then, like Jerry Lee Lewis marrying his 13-year-old cousin.
But speaking of cultural things, I think that was a cultural thing that was going on with them, right?
In the South.
Yeah. And
there's parental consent. Go ahead, Jerry Lee.
Oh, that's the other thing, right? With marriage, you can get married if you're under 16 with parental consent.
Yes.
It's just strange to give that consent, isn't it?
So basically, women, what we have said and what you should listen to and take from this is that you should date older men. Men who look rather like Warren and I. Men who have the experience and the sense of humor. You might not have the monetary...
the financial security
that you might be looking for.
Or the future financial security.
Experience, worldly, wise. And we're not dead.
This podcast is just all about selling yourself, isn't it?
Yes.
This has been listener feedback on the Warren and Bradley Show. If you'd like to get in touch, send your questions, comments, and concerns to podcast@warrenandbradley.com.
Warren.
Yeah.
It's time.
Yeah.
For Celebrity Minute on the Warren and Bradley Show.
Yeah.
Celebrity Minute on the Warren and Bradley Show.
All right, the top story that everyone is talking about this week.
Everyone at work was talking about this.
Everyone at work, everyone I see, they're like, oh, you've got to mention this on Celebrity Minute. Pregnant Snooki, I hate my boobs so much. Is that not the story that you thought it was going to be one? Oh, as she awaits the arrival of her first baby with fiancé Gianni Lavalle, Nicole Snooki Polizzi isn't ashamed to chow down while eating for two. That is, as long as her added pregnancy pounds don't settle in her chest. I actually want a big belly now, so I don't mind having brownies or fries. The only thing is, I've also gone up a cup size. I'm a D now. I hate my boobs so much. Well, you're not alone, Snooki. I hate your boobs as well. Intending to live with her fiancé's parents in the basement of their New Jersey home once the baby arrives, Snooki already plans to look to her son's grandparents for guidance in more ways than one. Me and Gianni have made a rule. If we're hungover or we've had 2 drinks, we're not going near the child. We'll give him to Grandma. God forbid we drop our baby.
Yeah, you don't want to drop the baby. I'm glad that lesson got through to Snooki, at least.
I see a future in perhaps astrophysics for this child.
This child is starting with a challenge in front of him.
Look at her. Ugh. All right, the real top story that everyone's talking about this week. Tom Cruise, Katie Holmes, divorcing.
Yes, it's finally happened.
Tomcat are no more. Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes are divorcing after 5 years of marriage.
Shocked, he pauses.
Basically, after 5 years of marriage, Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes are calling it Splitsville. Katie Holmes has filed for sole custody of their daughter, Suri, who is 6. There's also other stories here trying to break down what exactly went wrong. Other stories talking about how Katie Holmes seems like she's been set free post-split. Apparently, she had rented herself a New York apartment 2 weeks prior to filing divorce papers, so she already had an escape plan. She was ready to just get the fuck out of there as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. And now she's been seen out with her daughter in color-coordinated outfits, looking insanely happy.
Insanely happy?
Well, I added insanely.
Oh.
It said the smiling mommy-daughter duo sported coordinating black and white ensembles and stopped at their favorite spots, Serendipity 3 and the American Girl store. Looks like she's been miserable for so long, but the last couple of weeks she's been happy, like she's been set free, a source close to the actress says. What's your take on this, Warren? Are you shocked? Are you surprised?
Well, ever since this relationship began, it's pretty much been assumed that it was sort of a ruse.
Yes.
It was an attempt to make Tom Cruise look straight and normal.
Yes. And
it was an attempt to keep Katie Holmes' career alive.
Yes.
I think Tom Cruise is still doing pretty well. It was bound to happen eventually, right?
Yes. What I'm wondering about, I'm just taking it as read that it was some sort of weird financial arrangement that they had come to. I don't know if there was some contract like you have to be married to me for 5 years, you have to provide offspring, how much money changed hands. I'm just assuming that's the case, though. And
the reason I would be prone to think that as well is the fact that I heard a lot about when this relationship started to happen that Tom Cruise's people were out looking for the wife that they were going to arrange this marriage with, and they were calling like Kate Bosworth, and she was saying no, and they were calling a lot of people, and they eventually got down the list and got to Katie Holmes and sort of made this arrangement that this is what was going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this is the third marriage that has broken down for Tom Cruise. And what I'm amazed about is after, what's her name? What was the first one?
Mimi Rogers.
Mimi Rogers, then
Nicole
Kidman. Nothing has really come out from those relationships, and I wonder what kind of gag order is in place for, he's paying alimony or whatever, child support. You're getting a certain stipend every year for your silence, is my opinion.
Well, there are two elements of that as well, which is the fact that Tom Cruise is incredibly rich and powerful.
Yes.
And
you're not going to work ever again.
Well, because of the Scientology thing, too, right?
Yes, and Scientologists run Hollywood, basically.
And there's a lot of fear of, repercussions for anyone that would say
anything. It's all very creepy and sordid and weird. And in some ways, I kind of feel sorry for Tom Cruise because he seems... I was watching some video of Tom and Kate in their happier moments, or their, quote, happier moments, and just the look of extreme glee on his face looks so forced and so painful.
Yes.
It's sad that he can't live his normal life. If he is gay, it's sad that he just can't be gay.
Yes.
And still be... I think in this day and age, you could be gay and be powerful and a leading man in Hollywood.
But it's a risk.
It is a risk, and I know it's a risk. And then also all the weird Scientology bullshit. He was trying to force her to be a Scientologist. I don't know. It's all just very creepy.
No, and very rarely do people turn against that church or come out and say things about the church. So it will be interesting to see if we ever see a Katie Holmes book or if we see a Katie Holmes anything.
I seriously doubt it.
I seriously doubt it too.
She filed for sole custody, and she's also filing for spousal support, and I'm sure there's going to be some stipulation of a gag order for her to get her money. She's going to have to stay quiet.
What do you think the next move is for Tom Cruise? New wife?
I'm sure he'll go through the whole charade again, yeah.
He's got to, right?
He's almost 50 now, though. He's like 49, I think. It's just weird.
It's a very weird situation. But, I mean, it's strange that this is happening in the wake of what's going on with John Travolta as well.
Yes.
Which are two people that seem to have the same, life going on in a lot of ways.
Both Scientologists.
Both Scientologists.
You'd think they would have gotten their thetans out by now, and they'd be clear, and they wouldn't have these problems. Next story.
Kate Middleton will sleep on streets with homeless people.
Apparently, Kate Middleton has agreed to join British actress Liza Maxwell, who is an ambassador for the charity Centrepoint, for Sleep Out, a campaign aimed at raising awareness about London's growing homelessness problem, and will spend a night camped out on the streets of the capital. I love this bullshit where celebrities occasionally try to do something like this to show that they're getting in touch with the poor and downtrodden.
Yeah.
They're obviously not sleeping behind a dumpster behind the Rite Aid. They're camped out. I'm sure they've got a tent They probably got little portolets, bottled water, lots of Purell everywhere. None of the actual homeless people are going to be allowed to get anywhere near them unless there's a real photo op where they're like, okay, come forward,
Yes.
talk to Kate now, and she can get her picture in the paper, and then she can say that she's done something. It's that weird royal thing where Princess Di had her sweeping landmines, and now she has to be on homeless people.
Oh,
apparently.
you have to do that,
Yeah.
or else they'll just consider you a self-indulgent posh person, and people will be upset with you. So you have to at least pay some token attention to some sort of cause. The idea of her like actually going out and just being like telling the guards to like
See you later.
I'll be back tomorrow, and living and like sleeping behind a Boots or something.
She ends up giving blowjobs for meth eventually. Like, I don't know what's going to happen.
Or to even do that for one night would be mind-blowing if that actually
would
happened.
Never happen.
Because no one actually does that.
I could just imagine some drunken, bedraggled British homeless person coming up to her and like, hello, love, what you got here for? And she'd be, oh!
And the Bobbies
And
beat
they
him
would
to
come
death.
and beat him with
Yes.
batons, and he would be dragged away.
If, like, I lived on the streets tonight, I would always know that tomorrow night I would be able to go home.
Right.
If you're actually living on the streets and don't know where your next meal is going to come from or where you're going to, then you would actually understand probably
Yes.
more the plight of the people who live
But
out
there's
there.
no way Kate Middleton, who lives in Windsor Castle, is ever going to understand.
Prince William isn't going to be like, "Get out. I don't know when I'm going to let you back in. Fend for your fucking self." Then she would understand.
She would
life in
have
the
to sell
streets.
her body. That's the only way she would survive.
Yeah, that's true. I guess she could get a job too.
It's a little more dark to be a homeless woman, especially one who hasn't been used up by the streets yet.
Wow, that was a dark thing to say.
Yeah.
Oh, so God bless you, Kate. I hope your sister Pippa finds love.
Next story. Michael Jackson's tiger dies of lung cancer. It's not funny. It's a poor tiger who's
It's
dead.
a funny headline, though.
But Thriller, a tiger that belonged to Michael Jackson when the entertainer lived at Neverland, has died of lung cancer at Tippy Hedren's Wildlife Preserve near Los Angeles. I didn't know Tippy had a wildlife preserve. That's nice.
Yeah, Tippy's a little
She has lots of birds.
She's
there.
weird.
The 13-year-old, 375-pound tiger died June 11th. An autopsy was performed, and the tiger was cremated. Apparently, despite Jackson's love of animals, Hedren says he never called to check on the tiger and never sent any money to help pay for his care.
Yeah, Michael Jackson was mentally ill and just gone at a certain point.
We've had this discussion before, but when you get to the point of buying chimps and tigers and having a giant amusement park in your home,
You've completely lost any sort of connection to reality at that point.
I was just watching this documentary of Eric Bana made a documentary about his love of cars, and I was watching it. It was called Love the Beast. It was an all right documentary, but the thing I loved about it is the fact that he is still very close friends with friends that he had from high school. And he still hangs out with these people. They work on cars together. That's like their shared love. It's like their little campfire that they gather around. And it seems like people like that who are able to maintain relationships from before they were famous can maintain a down-to-earth demeanor and not go insane and crazy and become
Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
Because he just went crazy, started buying tigers
He
as
bought
well.
tigers as well.
I don't know what the thing is, but why you want a tiger? I don't care how much money I have.
It's fierce. And
I
it's
don't
like,
want a tiger.
I don't want a tiger either.
You know what I mean? I'd be like, can we bring this tiger back to India so it can just run around and have a good
Yes.
time? I don't need this tiger around. Tigers are dangerous.
They are.
They're dangerous, and it's like you have to feed them. I think Mike Tyson's bills for just feeding the tigers with thousands of dollars every month.
Well, Mike Tyson also had hundreds of ferrets that he apparently completely neglected, and they were living in squalor, and some ferret rescue thing
Well,
came
the
to his
interesting thing
house.
about Mike Tyson, I think, too, was the fact that when he was a kid, I think he was like Marlon Brando and On the Waterfront and actually had pigeons and stuff.
Yeah.
And sort of that. And I guess once you get hundreds of millions of dollars, you start taking your pigeon thing into ferrets and tigers.
There's this weird inner city black thing with pigeons. At least The Wire has taught me that, because Marlowe on The Wire had pigeons as well.
Yes, I've seen it in lots of movies about the pigeons they're raising, and they,
I
you
don't
know.
know what they do with them. They're not, and because they have homing pigeons, but they're not delivering missives anymore, as far as I know.
I think they just keep them and they feed them, and they have like their little flock of pigeons who live up there.
Yeah.
And they take off during the day and they come back at night. And it's sort of like your little pets.
Yeah, I guess.
And you learn to love them. Well, of course, Marlon Brando's character in On the Waterfront, a boxer as well.
Yes.
Because the interesting thing about that with Mike Tyson and with him on that movie was the fact that it showed their like compassionate side. They were handling these delicate birds.
Yes.
even though they are killing machines, and you put them in the ring.
Just snap their neck with one forefinger if they had to. Yeah, so we feel sorry for Thriller the tiger. I guess he had a nice long life and seemed very happy. Once he got taken out of the freak show that was Neverland and put in the nice Tippy Hedren Wildlife Sanctuary, I think he had a good
every
life.
tiger dreams he can go.
Smoking 2 packs a day, but you know. Yeah, we're not even going to get to this story. It's too long already. We just had one last story of Charlie Sheen being an asshole to his daughters. He sounds like a nice guy.
Speaking of people who are just completely disconnected after getting lots of money.
See, he had fucking 2.5 Men for a while. I don't know what kind of salary you make.
Oh, I believe 2.5 Men, he was making something like more than $1 million per episode of 2.5 Men.
Ridiculous.
So he's making an obscene amount of money.
I watched one episode of that show once because it was the most popular sitcom in America. It was the most pathetic, horrible thing I'd ever seen in my life. I didn't think they still made sitcoms like that. That multi-camera, canned laughter, bullshit, just like catchphrases.
Yes.
And
well, it's not just the fact that they still make those. That's what people still watch.
Well, and apparently his new show, Anger Management, is an exact retread of that show.
Of course. It worked in the first place. There's this division amongst people who watch TV at this point between people like, somebody was mentioning but Community. Everyone loves Community, right? The fact is nobody likes Community. Compared to how many people like 2.5 Men or The Big Bang Theory.
Right.
Barely anyone watches that show. Nobody watches Mad Men compared to how much that people watch, Criminal Minds.
It's the difference between normal people and intelligent people, and most people are normal, i.e. stupid.
And now you're just taking shots at flyover country.
Well,
people in Nebraska.
I'm not saying people in Nebraska. There's intelligent people in Nebraska. There's really stupid people here, too. In fact, most of the people here are fucking idiots. If you like Anger Management, or if you did previously like 2.5 Men, stop listening to the show right now. And this has been Celebrity Minute on the Warren and Bradley Show.
Listeners, as usual.
We can afford to alienate people.
This has been Celebrity Minute on the Warren and Bradley Show.
Okay, we have time. Do we have time? We better have time. We have to do Street Freak of the Week.
Okay.
They wander the streets, scavenging for loose change and discarded cigarette butts.
Spare $1.
And give me a motherfucking cigarette.
I ran out of gas ways back. Got nothing.
You smoke weed, don't you?
God gives you my car.
I could use some change.
They may be mentally unstable and deserving of our charity, but that doesn't mean they can't be selected as the Warren and Bradley Show Street Freak of the Week.
Okay, so Warren, you'll like this.
Oh, good.
Yesterday, as I was enjoying my coffee on the corner, smoking 25 feet away from any entrance or window of any public building, as I forced to do with the ridiculous laws in Washington State, I heard a commotion going on. Turned to my right, across the street by the bus station. There was a very interesting specimen of the homeless population. He was grizzled, bearded, but his beard was somehow flamboyant and well-shaped, but long and gray. He was wearing a black bandana on his head like a pirate.
Oh, huh?
He was wearing jeans that were kind of baggy, and then he had them pegged and rolled like we used to do when we were little kids. So they were sort of like pantaloons.
Yeah.
And then he had kind of high socks and a black sort of piratey shirt, and he had a bouquet of flowers, kind of bedraggled posies.
Yeah.
And he was going, tra-la-la-la-la, like literally saying tra-la-la-la-la.
Oh, he's having a great time.
Oh, and he was prancing about on the street. And people were walking by, and he was very aggressively getting close to them. Like, he'd go, tra-ha-ha-ha, and get right in their face and kind of get in their way, and they would go, and have to try to walk around him.
Yeah.
And then finally, there was this large woman pushing a stroller, and he went, ha-ha-ha, and hit her with the flowers, as though he were
He wasn't getting enough reaction,
No,
apparently.
he was like giving a benediction or something with the flowers, and was like, ha-ha-ha-ha, and smacking her on the back with them. At that point, 2 bicycle cops who were riding by on their little bicycles, they saw what was going on. They stopped. They immediately grabbed the guy and handcuffed him, like with no preamble whatsoever. he started flipping out, and I couldn't really understand exactly what was going on, but it's very hard to do an impersonation of this guy because he sounded flamboyantly gay, but then also horribly old and grizzled homeless man. So it was a combination of like, with ha 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 ha, and I can't combine the two properly. Yeah, it was like, what are you, I can't do it. It's impossible. I'd have to get, several days of practice or something. But anyway, they handcuffed him. I couldn't hear their cop patter, or like, sir, you got to do this, sir. But, they're always, in Bellingham, the cops are always insanely calm and insanely long-suffering, and they sit and talk. They'll say something to him, and then the homeless guy will just rant on for about 20 minutes, and they just sit there and nod.
And they wait.
They had him handcuffed. While he was handcuffed, he still had his bouquet of flowers. And what put the cops over the edge is that he somehow managed to manipulate the bouquet with his hands cuffed behind his back as well.
Yeah.
He pulled a flower out and went, ha, 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 and went near one of the cops and tried to put the flower into the holster of his gun.
I think that has less to do with them putting the flower in the holster as much as him reaching for the cop's gun.
Well, he was going near the gun. And I think he was trying to recreate the famous photo from the 60s.
Does he think he's doing some sort of protest
I don't know. Where the student put the flower into the barrel of the National Guard troops' gun. But he tried to put it in the holster, and they immediately went, ha ha, and grabbed him by the arms and slammed him down onto the ground. And I couldn't hear what the cop said, but then he kept saying, "Are you trying to tell me to shut up? Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're saying?" And just repeated this over and over and over and over. And then finally, he went for their gun. I don't think he was actually going for the gun, but he was trying to put flowers in their guns. He was flailing around on the ground, and they were still just kind of standing there. At this point in L.A., they would have gotten tasers and billy clubs out and just started going to town on him. Finally, he sort of calmed down, and I could hear him saying, "I'm done. I'm done now.
Oh, good.
I'm done." And they're like, "All right, you're done. You're done." They released the handcuffs. And again, they kind of had their arms on him.
Really, him just saying he's done means they believe him?
Well, he calmed down. He was fine. And so they still sort of had him contained. There was a cop on each arm, and they were saying something to him I couldn't hear. And he was nodding like, okay, I'm done. Okay. And then they're like, all right. Stepped away, and he immediately went, and started flailing the flowers around again and skipping down the street going, "I'm not done, I'm not done, I'm not done." The cops just kind of went, ugh, and got back on their bikes and drove off. He skipped across the street and started just getting in people's faces going, ha, 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 and flipping the flowers around and skipping down the street.
This is what you have to do if you're a cop.
It's the worst job in the world.
It's not a good job.
It makes me understand why they freak out and beat people every once in a while.
Yes.
I wanted to smack.
I don't want them to freak out and beat people.
No, I don't either.
Make a mistake when I say that I understand why they do it, but I understand where they get to the point where they're like, "Give me a break."
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Just chill the fuck out.
Disturbing the peace, maybe intimidating people. I don't know exactly.
Hitting the person with the flowers.
Yeah, I guess that could be assault.
But again, we've talked about this before. It's what are you gonna do with him?
Yeah,
you put him in jail, and then he's like filling up a cell, and you're like, you eventually let him go.
You want actual like real violent criminals. But then the coda to this story is today I was at Gurpreet's, my local mini market.
Yes.
And as I exited the store, there's always a lot of homeless people kind of camped out around there because it's right near the Lighthouse Mission. I saw the flamboyantly gay pirate homeless man, and he was sort of jauntily kind of leaned up as though he were on like a chaise lounge, but he wasn't. He was just on a hillock of dirt. And he had his legs crossed and was flamboyantly smoking a cigarette, but he had a bloody lip now. So apparently somebody was not too amused by the flower shenanigans that he was engaging in.
You're eventually going to get a bloody lip if you start doing that. Yeah. It's just a matter of time.
So congratulations, Mr. Flamboyantly Gay Pirate Homeless Man. You've been selected as the Warren and Bradley Show Street Freak of the Week.
Lucky guy.
Our hats are off to you, Mr. Homeless Man, because you've been selected as the Warren and Bradley Show Street Freak of the Week. This has been the Warren and Bradley Show, brought to you by Warren Van and Bradley Victor. For podcast news and information, like the show on Facebook at facebook.com/Warren and Bradley. Follow the show on Twitter at Warren and Brad. Subscribe on iTunes and leave a review. For episode archives and episode pictures, go to warrenandbradley.com, and to contact the show, write to podcast@warrenandbradley.com.